So we're looking at social change, looking at domestic violence, especially within the South Asian community. So the evening consists of some guest speakers and a 25-minute video that Bhulla, Beghal, the host, has put together following a deaf woman and her experience in domestic violence and how it ended on a positive note for her. But obviously it doesn't end that way for everybody. So it also looks at what to look out for and the support available for all women going through this currently.
Look, thank you all for being here today, every single one of you. We're all here to raise the awareness of domestic abuse across South Asian communities. I guess I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the man himself. So, Bhulla is a young, passionate art/creative graduate. He's not a charity, he is not an organisation. He is an individual who is working alone at the moment, but really wants to get out there and create awareness around many things. And one of those things is focused on domestic abuse across South Asian communities. So please join me in a warm welcome for Bhulla Beghal.
Thank you, Richie. First of all, sorry about the late start. It's actually the reason, my first point, the reason I'm doing this is to create awareness. A year and a half ago, I set out to create awareness because I just spent years frustrated at why this topic of domestic abuse in South Asian communities was never spoken about. It was always hushed. The reason people are always told to, it happens, shut up or shut up. That really frustrated me. So I created a hard-hitting visual film because I thought, what a way to go against the grain. It turns out it's blown up in conversations. It's instigated this night. And the reason why we started late is because we were doing the interview with ITV. And that is a big step forward for this topic, the fact that it's going into the media and this topic is getting the recognition that it deserves. And so, me, myself, I'm an artist and I strive to understand the world around me. And I've grown up questioning my culture. I'm questioning why the bad things are done with the reason of preventing shame. Now, that's why I created the short production, which you'll see later this evening. It covers not just domestic abuse, it covers all sorts of issues that I'm passionate about. And without further ado, we're going to the first segment, which will be presented by Sahdaish Pall from Ashram, and she'll be presenting what is domestic abuse, how can it be recognised. So please, a round of applause for Sahdaish Pall.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sahdaish Pall, and I think first of all we need to start by giving Bhulla a round of applause for inviting us here today and putting up this really creative film. I think it's fantastic to see that a young man, specifically a young man, has picked up this issue and has produced this film to raise awareness, because often young people are frowned upon and they're talked about in a negative way, and especially when it comes to this arena, when we're talking about domestic violence and abuse, often it's not recognised that men also want to bring an end to domestic violence just as much as women do. So I congratulate Bhulla for that. I work for an organisation called the Accord Group, and Ashram Housing Association and Accord provide services around domestic violence. Should bring up my slides. So this is me. I'm the locality manager for Walsall, and I'm also the children and families lead, and so therefore domestic violence comes under my remit. This is our mission statement. We strive to be a strong, diverse group which makes the most of our individual and combined strengths to deliver a positive outcome, improving the life chances for our customers and the wider communities we serve. And when I talk about a group, this will help you understand what I mean. We're a group of 5 housing associations, and this is the work that we do specifically around domestic violence and abuse. We've got 2 domestic violence refuges, one in Birmingham and one in Walsall. So we've got a 16-bed unit and a 24-bed unit, and we also host 10 dispersed units in the community. And these dispersed units are also available to men who are experiencing domestic violence as well. We've got community-based floating support services in Birmingham and Walsall. So this, what it means is that we're able to go into the community and support women who are not maybe ready to come into refuge, or may have been in refuge and go back into the community and settle in, and they still need ongoing support. We also have a court IDVA service. So this is a service where we support women through the court system, and we support them when they're making cases for domestic violence, actually, or men, and this is within the Walsall unit. We've also got children's services, counselling services. We also host a perpetrator programme in Coventry, and something that we've also just been awarded in the Sandwell area. And we've just rounded up on a domestic violence prevention project, but we hope to continue that, to continue delivering training across the community to help raise awareness of the issues. So what constitutes domestic violence and abuse? This is the government definition, and I'm sure most of you have already seen this, but what I want to bring to your attention is the last couple of lines of the definition, which is where it recognises that domestic violence happens to between intimate partners and family members, regardless of gender or sexuality. And the reason I point out that is because I know that there's still organisations out there that feel that domestic violence only happens between partners, and actually we know, and specifically within South Asian communities, and that domestic violence can actually happen within the family and also within your family unit. It can be your parents, can be your in-laws, and also it's made worse by the issues around the wider community as well. So I'll just click through the different definitions. So as you can see, the definitions are there. So it's psychological, physical, sexual, financial, and emotional. So I'll go through the meaning of each definition, because I'm sure you understand all of them. But again, towards the end in 2012, the definition was changed to include FGM, which is female genital mutilation, forced marriages, which we know has now become a crime, and also honour-based violence. So it's important to recognise that the government itself now recognises that this is a form of abuse, and it's taken note that this is the form of abuse that happens predominantly in South Asian and BME communities. So as I just alluded to, forced marriage is a form of domestic abuse that happens predominantly within South Asian communities, although it does happen slightly wider than that as well. So forced marriage is where somebody is could happen in this country or often taken abroad against their will. And there is a forced marriage unit set up by the Home Office, and they receive thousands of inquiries every single year, and they deal with hundreds of cases every single year as well. So this is where a forced marriage is intervened at, could be at airports. Somebody may make a report because they feel they're at risk of being forced into marriage because they may have heard things that have been said at home. And as well as that, there's been cases where women have been brought back from abroad where they've managed to alert the authorities where forced marriage is about to or has taken place. Honour-based violence. Again, this can happen in our community, and it can be for simple things like your parents might not be happy with the way that you dress. It could be that you want to learn to drive. It might be that you want to go to university. And it can be as simple things as that people believe that you've brought shame on the family and they don't like the way that you behave, and therefore honour-based violence could take place. And as we know that honour-based violence can also lead to death as well, because we know of cases where young girls have been murdered for wanting to live a more Western sort of life. FGM, again, this is an issue that affects communities, mostly BME communities, but it is known to happen within some South Asian communities. And again, it's important to stress that there is no religion that says that FGM is acceptable. And this is a cultural and tribal practice. And again, this is something that's often perpetrated by the women in the family and within the community. Dowry abuse. We talk about all the other forms of abuse, but dowry abuse is something that's not discussed very often. And this was a practice which started a long time ago, which was really set up to help provide a source of income to women, because historically they weren't educated, they weren't able to have a job. And so dowry was given to the daughter when she got married, so that if anything happened in the family or something happened to her husband, she'd be able to look after her children and continue with her life. However, it quickly switched to becoming demands from the in-laws family. And where daughter-in-laws or the families have not been able to meet the demands, consequences can be quite serious, anything from emotional to physical abuse to death. Feticide. Again, this is a real an issue that's quite close to my heart. Something that's not talked about very often. This is where people abort female fetuses because it's a female. And we've known of this happening in places like India and Pakistan, and India more so because we've heard research which tells us about the disproportionate levels of boys to girls, and so we know it's happening out there. But we also know that it's a practice which happens here, and because of that, we know that hospitals have started to refuse to tell people the sex of the child at scans and things like that, because even they recognise that this is happening. And then we've got modern day slavery and trafficking, and this is where we're coming across a lot of young women who are being brought from abroad on the pretense of being married and coming over to start a life for themselves. And what happens is when they come over, they're often made to work day and night, look after sick family members and care for them. And we had a case a couple of years ago where a young Pakistani girl was brought over. Her passport was faked. She was actually only about 14. She didn't actually know her age because they'd never celebrated birthdays in her family. But her passport said she was 21 years old, and she was brought over into this country, and she was abused, she was raped, and it was the only thing she was allowed to do was attend college to learn English, and that's where she told her teacher about what was going on, and that's how she got support and engaged with our services. So the impact of domestic violence is very varied, and what you'll see is often the experience of domestic violence is very similar in all communities, regardless of which community you're from. So there's isolation from family and friends, there's loss of income and work, homelessness, emotional and psychological effects, which women can experience anxiety and depression, low sense of self-worth and self-esteem, poor health, physical injury, or ongoing impairment. And we're working with a case at the moment where a lady has lost all her sight in one eye, and she's partially sighted in the other because she's been through 9 years of physical violence, and that's the consequence of this violence. It can also affect those that are pregnant and can have an effect. They may miscarry, or the child may be stillborn. And we know that often women have to take time off work. I mean, I work in the health and social care sector, but even I know colleagues who have had to take time off work because of their experiences. They don't want to come in the following day with a black eye or bruising, and so this can have a financial effect on them, and it can affect somebody's career. And this is some research that's a statistic that we hear quite often, that 2 women are murdered every week by their current or former partner. And I don't know how many of you have seen some recent articles around women committing, I shouldn't say committing, I should say taking their own life from South Asian communities. And there was an article recently about a railway track in Southall, which they call Little India. And this is a place where often women go and take their own life. Those statistics don't include those women who are actually finding it difficult to seek help, and then they become so depressed that they end up taking their own life. So it doesn't include that. So, like I said, the experience is very similar across all communities, but the impact on South Asian communities, there's the additional issues and concerns that they have to deal with. So they're stigmatised and ostracised by the family members and the community. Murder because of perceived honour or dishonour. Abuse from the wider family, in-laws, parents, siblings. In cases of forced marriage, it's often your own parents or your own siblings. Deportation because of immigration issues. And I've put suicide there because we know that research does tell us that women from South Asian communities are 2 to 3 times more likely to take their own life than women in the general population. So, barriers to accessing support. Often communities, women have very complex family structures, and we know, obviously, that in some communities that your father-in-law and your mother-in-law can be your paternal uncles and aunts. So it's very, very close-knit families, and that becomes an issue. Transnational marriages create a distance, so maybe your support network might be back home in India and Pakistan and your home countries, but you've got no support here, so that adds to it. There's also pressure from the family to stay in the abusive relationship due to cultural concepts of honour and shame. There's lack of English, lack of qualifications, or your qualifications don't count here. Lack of employment prospects. Often women don't know about their rights and what services are available to them out there. Again, the insecure immigration status, that's often threatened. And when children are involved as well, they think that if they're deported, what happens to their children? I've put this one in because it's fear of lack of support from agencies. And partially this is because we know that from some of the women that we've worked with, They said that they didn't go to the police because they know what happens in their home country, and therefore they were worried about going to the police because they thought maybe they'd get treated in exactly the same way here as well. And they didn't realise that things work very differently in this country. And then disabilities. And now we know from research that women who have a disability are more likely to be abused. But it's quite funny that, well, it's not funny, but we don't see as many women with disabilities, whether they're learning disabilities or difficulties or physical disabilities, coming to access support from our services. And I think partly that's because they're worried about how they're going to be supported, or they're worried about where the finances are going to come from, and therefore they don't access support. So what I've done is I've put a list of things to do together for everybody. And good practice tells us that if anybody approaches you asking you for support or to talk to you about their experiences of domestic violence and abuse, you should listen, reassure them, and then be non-judgmental. So as you can see, what you should do is listen carefully, prioritise the victim's safety and the children's safety, find out what the victim wants, because it might not be that they want to go into refuge, so there are other options for them, because that might not be what their desired outcome is. They might want to remain in their home, but there are other legal options that they can go down. And find out if the victim wishes to talk to somebody else. So often, obviously, the reason that women come to our refuge sort of provision is because they know that when they come there, they only have to speak to women, and they feel comfortable in speaking to women about their experiences. Some of the experiences are very personal to them, and therefore they don't want to be discussing it with anybody else. And it's about providing information. Now, I know that I haven't got much time left, so I'm sure that in the slides that you'll see there is information about what you should do, and if we'll move forward. What you shouldn't do. There you go. Thank you very much for listening, and obviously I'll be here till the end for any questions.
Thank you, Sahdaish. That was a very interesting presentation. 2 women a week murdered, even involving suicide. I must say before we go on as well, if you have any questions during any presentations, we've got time at the end for a Q&A with all guest speakers there. So you could just note it down. There's a section in the back of the booklet, space for you to write anything in. Then we can go through them questions at the end. And now, let's welcome Dr. Karan Jutlla, who will be speaking about the cultural barriers.
Okay, well, good evening everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, excuse me, I'm going to put my glasses on because I can't see you very well. So don't think you get away with pulling faces at me. There you go, there you are. Okay, so firstly, thank you, Bhulla, for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak to you all today. As you can see, I'm currently a senior lecturer in dementia studies. However, I only have 3 weeks left of my employment because I'm about to become an independent consultant in dementia care. This is where you give me a round of applause. Now that I've finished shamelessly advertising, I'll explain why I'm here. You're probably wondering why, when I'm specialised in dementia care, I'm here talking at a domestic abuse seminar. I have no academic or work experience in working with people who have experienced domestic abuse. However, Bhulla is known very, very well to me, and I've got to say he's one of the most creative individuals I've ever met, and he showed me his film. And when I watched this film, I started to think about my doctoral research with the Sikh community that I conducted in 2011. And this research was with Sikh carers who were caring for a family member with dementia. And actually, some of the issues and challenges were very, very similar to the kind of things that Bhulla was trying to highlight. So I returned to my transcripts, the raw data, had another look at them, and did some reanalysis. And that's exactly what I'm going to present you with today. It's in their own words. So it's an insight into some of the experiences of women from the Sikh community and highlight some of the things that you were very much talking about. And I guess one of the key things that came out as well is that even though it's about dementia, okay, domestic abuse and dementia are two very, very different illnesses, if you like. However, the challenges were very, very similar because it was largely about cultural norms and roles and positions in the family. So I'm going to give you a little background and context to that research so that we can put it into further context. So if we're looking at dementia in South Asian communities, okay, we know that there's lower levels of knowledge and awareness about dementia, like there might be about domestic abuse. There's no word for dementia in any of the South Asian languages. Huge stigma of mental health. This, of course, means that it's often a hidden problem. You get a low dementia diagnosis and people then present themselves when they're in a very crisis situation. When we think about barriers and help-seeking behaviours, okay, we know that they lack knowledge and access to the services available, that they're culturally inappropriate, or they deem them so, that there are language barriers. Often reluctant to ask for and accept formal support, again very similar to what you were talking about. Huge reliance on familial roles and a duty to care, and this need to portray an image of well-being to those outside of the family. And from a service perspective, a lot of the work that I do is with health practitioners, and it's brilliant that there are health practitioners here in the audience today. We even have a GP, which is just fantastic. There's still assumptions that people from these communities look after their own. Doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it well, which was reported by the Department of Health in 1998. So, just focusing now then on my research with the Sikh community then, again, there were issues around shame and stigma, but also lots of emphasis on their roles and positions in the family. And this rolls on quite nicely from the previous presentation actually, because what the women were telling me, I was conducting narrative interviews, so there were storytelling interviews. I didn't have specific questions, I just asked them about their personal histories and their experiences, and they told me what they thought was important to them. And lots of women were talking about their experiences of being a daughter-in-law. And this is the area that I particularly focused on. If we think about barriers to help seeking and issues around shame and stigma, just to give you an example, so this is a participant from the pilot study, I'll read it out. She said, I really struggled at the beginning, mainly because I wouldn't send Dad to daycare. I was scared of what the community would say about me for sending him, that I wasn't a good daughter and that I couldn't look after him properly. But the community psychiatric nurse encouraged me to do it, and although it really helps me because I work as well, I still feel that they're pointing fingers at me. It's horrible, really. I feel like an outcast. Similarly, Simajit Kaur, 49-year-old woman who was caring for her mother, when informed of her financial entitlements, stated, I've never asked because they'll start saying she's taking money for her mum. It's very expensive. They don't realise it's hard to get by. So the stigma that would be attached to her, therefore, resulted in her initial refusal of financial entitlements. And that's That's quite a small thing, but for Simoji it had quite devastating consequences. This next quote is quite powerful. A lady called Rampiari, she said, "With us being Indians or Asians, it's like the besti, shame. If you turn around and say that I can't cope with looking after this person anymore, if we turned around and it got to the stage where Dad needed feeding, washing, medication and bedpans and whatever else, I don't think my husband could do it, and to tell you the truth, I don't know if I can do it. So it would mean putting him in a home, and it would be the shame of that. People would actually point their finger and say, look what so-and-so's son did, threw him out of the house, and I think that's a community attitude. Whereas I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in the white population. I'm sure things like that would happen, but people are more objective. They would turn around and say, well, actually, yeah, perhaps it was too much responsibility for that one son or daughter-in-law to look after them properly, and he's getting better treatment now than he would have been at home, but our community just really pressurises us." She then went on to say, "And it does make me angry, you know. I think to myself, well, hang on, I've done everything my parents taught me to do, to respect your in-laws, your husband, don't speak up, don't argue and all that. But where has it got me?" What this highlights is how women can often be taught to be in subjugated positions, okay? So that means almost being in a position where they're being forced to coerce in a certain way, and almost throughout childhood they've been infused with this idea of you cannot speak up. And they were explicitly telling me that. They were saying, I've been brought up with you respect your elders, you listen to them, so if there were areas I didn't quite, I used to think, well, okay, these are the people I've got to answer to now. Karina, 50 years old, said they, so her in-laws, were very, very backward people. They never changed, but I try and fit into the family, but they always picked on me. Living the old way like Indians would, you know, I got to cover my face, I can't wear this, I can't do that, I can't do, you know, she would tell me all of these things. My mother-in-law would even tell me what clothes I could wear and what I can't wear, and how I could do my hair and what I couldn't do with my hair, and what I could cook, you know, when I was supposed to cook and when not to. But you know, the way I understood it, because I listened to my mum and dad growing up, you were just taught to listen and never answer back. So I never did. And if we think about the different types of abuse that you can get from family members, the question I ask you, is this a form of emotional or psychological abuse? And you can see that it has psychological consequences for these women. The participants in the study reported cases of depression, isolation and loneliness, that we picked up from the previous presentation, physical health problems, and interestingly were very ambivalent about cultural norms and their community, really questioning their community norms. And sometimes we forget and we don't actually realise that becoming a daughter-in-law actually brings with it an entirely new set of responsibilities and a completely different position, as nicely emphasised by Rampiari. She said, and I think this is the case for a lot of women, I lost my home, I lost my job, I lost my friends, I lost my identity, I lost everything that was familiar to me overnight, and I had to just become this wife, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, and those responsibilities were just placed on my shoulders straight away. How does someone in that position reach out if they are experiencing some kind of abuse? Karina, even though she was being mistreated, continued to salvage her relationships and conform. And even for her was the reasons why she thinks she developed cancer. She says, because of everything my husband's family put me through when I got married, it was so stressful. I was only young. I felt like I was being bullied, their slave, all that stress it caught up with me. I got cancer in the end. how she psychologically internalised her illness speaks volumes about what she may have been going through. A case of depression. Ron Piari, she said, I had depression and I made jene padure, which is a chickpea dish. And my mother-in-law turned around and said, this is rubbish, you're feeding this to my children. And I thought, I'm not taking this. So that was Sunday. On Monday I got up, I went to the chemist, and I got 32 paracetamol, and I went to the other shop, and I got another 32 paracetamol, and then I went to the wine shop, and I got a bottle of gin. I've never drank gin in my life, but I know you always have pills and gin, and that night I can now, but at that point I couldn't swallow tablets, so I had to crush them, and I sat there with a chopping board and a spoon, and I crushed all the tablets. I must have crushed about 20 tablets, I suppose, a nice pile. I poured myself some gin in this glass, and the house was deadly quiet. And I just sat there and I thought, you know, what the hell am I doing? I've got 3 lovely children. What's really interesting is that even though these women were experiencing these challenges, they were still teaching their children similar values. And this is where ambivalence remains. And when you're ambivalent, you're on the fence. On the one hand, it's really bad, but you very quickly find a positive for it. And I've taught my daughters respect in-laws, don't answer back and all that. Similarly, another participant, I don't mind if they find their own, but I said, I just want one thing. He has to be one of ours, same caste, same religion. It is starting to get better, I think. We are starting to talk more with the next generation. But what concerns me is that women are still being taught not to answer back and to speak up after marriage. Those norms are very much still there. Incidences of mental health, particularly I see it in my area of work, and depression in South Asian women are increasing. And that community still remains a really important influence in people's lives. And I'd just like to end on this note and say that in South Asian communities, there's no word for dementia, just the sign and symptoms. There's no word for domestic abuse, just the sign and symptoms. How can you talk about something if you don't know it exists? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Karen. And what a great point to end on. And that is pretty much what this evening is about. Let's acknowledge what's going on. Now, next is the film. It was something I made in my final year at university. And I made it in her point of view. Reason being is because I wanted to take the viewer as close as I can into her point of view as possible, because I strive to put myself in others' shoes. It's what helps me understand them, and it allows me to connect with their feelings, and I wanted people to do the same with her, who the film is about. And so something you should know about the character is that she lip reads, and you'll realise why when the film is playing. And without I'm acting in it, so please don't be alarmed. Just acting. So we'll be showing the film now. If you could do the lights. Yeah, as you can see, that very experimental from my point of view. That's just one account of many. It involves autism, which is discrimination against deaf people. And what I wanted to catch from that is the isolation. And the silence in that film not only refers to her being deaf, it also refers to the silence in women in situations like this. It can be isolating. The silence of that film, it's exhausting to watch. So any questions, we'll have time for that at the end. And now we've got a brave individual who will be speaking about a different account, her account. And she'll be speaking about her experiences, and she'll also be conveying a lot of inspiration. And from what I get from it will be hope. So can we please welcome...
Thank you, Bhulla, for asking me to be part of this seminar. And as a young, incredible... I need a box of tissues. I want you all to applaud this young man. He's very creative and... his sisters, incredible creative individuals. We must support people like him to convey the message across of what happens out there. And coming from a young man like Bhulla, going out there and speaking to him, his generation, and to create that awareness, I actually applaud this guy. And Bhulla, it's been an honour to come here to actually share my experiences with you. I didn't think that I would share what I went through in my life today, but I see it as the last time I'm telling you my story, because for me it is the end of the chapter. From today onwards, I'll be opening a new chapter and be in control of my own life. I am a social entrepreneur and a motivational speaker. By day, I work for a private education organisation. Outside of my job, I help nourish children around the world with other women social entrepreneurs. It doesn't feel like work at all. It feels like a group of friends with a similar vision and goals, helping change people and children's lives. We dream, we inspire, we motivate and develop each other at the same time. Life teaches us many things, and if we learn along the way, we can become better people. I am what I am today of my life experiences. I chose to walk on the path created by me and not by anyone else. I cannot say it has been easy. It has been incredibly hard, and I'm sure that there will be challenges today and in the future. But I can tell you now, I am prepared for that, because today I have the strength, the courage, and most of all, I have the belief in myself. I always believe as long as the heart and mind is pure, you have good intentions, and stay positive today, tomorrow will take care of itself, and the people around me will be okay too. If I can change one person's life, for me, that would be a blessing. I am standing here today to share my experience, my life, what I went through, how it impacted on me, and how I coped and how I got through it all, what made me change. I was a carefree young individual with a college education. At the age of 21, my family started receiving marriage proposals. I kept turning them down and told my parents I'm not ready for marriage. They backed off. A few months later, my gran passed away. I was very close to my gran. Things at home weren't good either, and it wasn't getting any better. The marriage proposal came along. My family asked me again, but this time they said to me, before you give us an answer, Why don't you meet the person? And if you still feel you're not ready, then we won't force you. I actually agreed to that meeting because at home there were problems and I wanted to live my life my way and pursue my dreams as an artist, which didn't go too well with my parents. And that's why I actually said that Bhulla, as a young person, incredible, creative person, I didn't get that support. So if people like Bhulla get that support, he could be an incredible, I can see him doing things in the future. He seemed pleasant, spoke English very well, so I thought there would be no communication barrier. He was educated, working 2 days and studying. That was commitment. I decided that this is an escape route to get away and be able to pursue what I wanted in life. I decided to get married, and within less than 2 months, I got married to a guy from India who was at Reading University on a student visa. I moved to Oxford. I wanted to spend time to get to know this person. Instead, the day after the wedding, I was forced to do things I didn't want. And that made me uncomfortable, but was told that I have to fulfill my duty. Everything happened so quickly. I realised I got married for all the wrong reasons. And that at that moment in time, reality hit me. New city, new people, strangers I didn't know. I didn't even have a job. The family was quite old-fashioned. Colours I couldn't obey. I shrugged it off and ignored it. I was brought up in a Western culture and I mixed East and West and did what I felt was right for me. It all started changing. I was told how I should behave as a daughter-in-law and a sister-in-law. Who I can talk to, who I can't. How I should treat my husband, what I should cook for him, what I should be wearing and how I should look. When my family came to visit, it was all happy and smiley faces. As soon as they would leave, they would criticise my family. All of this behaviour was getting too much for me. It got to the stage the family started saying that his family started saying that they got the wrong person married. It should have been my sister, as she was the prettiest and the slimmest one, and I was the least prettiest of all four. All these remarks started chipping away at me, but there was a voice inside of me said, "It will get better." When we were out at parties or family functions, the biggest problem he had was drink. He would drink too much. When we got home, he was like Jekyll and Hyde. Bloodshot eyes with anger. As soon as I spoke, he just got into a fit of rage. I was horrified at what I was seeing. I started to fear him. When I spoke to people, especially men, I was accused of having an affair with them. Being forced to do things I didn't want to, I continued. I just followed to keep the peace in my home. I realised how his own insecurities was pushed on me. I had my own to deal with. We moved to the Midlands within the year due to our immigration case being dealt by a solicitor in Birmingham. He found a good job working nights. I was working too. I thought being away from his family would help things get better. It only got worse. When a bank statement came through, every penny on the statement had to be accounted for. Every purchase, every receipt had to be saved. The mileage on the car was recorded and monitored. When he returned from his night duty, he would check if the engine of the car was warm or cold. There was no trust. I was being accused of having an affair with my sister's husband. His drinking increased. He became aggressive, abusive, calling me names. His family started filling his head. That a mental abuse was killing me, killing my confidence, my self-esteem. I was feeling worthless, my dreams non-existent. It continued to the extent that I decided to end it all. I tried to take my own life. Maybe it was a cry for help, I don't know. I was saved by my sister and brother-in-law. Although my family started to know that I wasn't happy, they said I should make it work. these things happen and that I have to deal with it. Time passed. Nothing changed except me. My professional life was great, but my personal life was not. I started staying at work longer hours so that I could spend less time at home. I joined kickboxing, started running. I hated the weekends and I dreaded spending 48 hours at home. A little voice in my head kept saying, it will get better. I decided if I have a child, it will get better. When things got bad, I went to my parents. I would stay there for weeks. This continued constantly. But I returned every time due to cultural and society pressures. Family were worried how they would explain divorce to the community. So I was forced to keep trying. I lost my friends. I stopped meeting my family. I never attended any parties or family functions. My son came. I ended up having postnatal depression. 10 years of suffering. I was full of anger, bitterness, and was just increasing. It was increasing towards him, my family, and society. I was hurting, heartbroken, but continued to keep the peace. My friends stopped coming because they felt they would make things worse. Time passed by. I didn't know who I was. The bedroom door would be locked. My son would be banging outside the door. Mum, let me in. It continued. It all changed when I went running to my family. I had enough. I was in tears. I just wanted a hug from my mum. I wished to hear her say, it's going to be okay. But my family was told me, put up or shut up. I turned around and I walked out that door and wiped away my tears and thought, this battle I have to fight alone. On many occasions I started to fear my son's safety. One day I thought, if anything happens to my son, I will never be able to forgive myself. I did not want to bring up a child in a negative environment. I wanted to bring up my son to respect women, and I couldn't do that in the current situation I was in. People laughed in my face when I told them that I am going to divorce him, and was told that I was stupid to even think it. The divorce shocked the community, as it was the first in my family. People started coming to my parents' house as if it was a funeral and started feeling sorry for me. I got angry and replied back, how dare you come here and feel sorry for me? I am quite capable of looking after myself and my child. One evening after work, I picked up my son from my parents. I was strapping him up in the car seat. My son was 5 at that time. He asked me a question. Mum, are you a good mum? I replied, what do you think? He said, everybody is talking about you, Mum. Mum, I have been in your tummy for 9 months. I have been close to your heart. No one else has. I have seen your heart. Tears rolled down my eyes. He said, Mum, me and you are going to be okay. That was a turning point for me. I had no one's support, but I realized I must be strong for my son. I had no friends, no one. During my life, I was being the victim. Why me? Constantly questioning myself. Why have I done to deserve this? It didn't help me at all. People come into your lives for a reason. Certain individuals did just that. They encouraged me, they gave me strength, they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. They made me realize I was not true to myself. The real me started coming out. The support, the guidance, and the constant reminder of stop being the victim. You are strong. I am very grateful for those people who have helped me on this journey. I will never forget what they have done for me, and I hope they can find it in their hearts to forgive me, as at times I never appreciated what they did for me. We are humans, we make mistakes, but we never forget where we are, how we got here today. There are two paths to choose from in life. We can be the victim, but that does not take you anywhere. It's a lonely path, and life will continue to be a struggle. Then there is a path where you keep your head held high and think what's happened has happened. Things can only get better and move on, and life does get easier. I decided to change my thinking from negative thinking to positive thinking. I started to change myself. I started attracting positive people in my life who shared similar goals and visions. It helped me grow as a person. I began to be aware of what I'd said and what I did, and always ensured that is positive words. It has been difficult to move on. It has been a constant struggle. What I have realised is we cannot change what is around us, but we can change ourselves. It starts from within. Changing our mindset. It's tough to stay positive. You must train your mind. I started 18 months ago reading positive affirmations, quotes, listening to self-development CDs, meditating, listening to motivational speakers, Les Brown, Jim Rohn, Anthony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, and today I can achieve whatever I want in life. I deserve the best. It doesn't happen overnight. Training the mind is hard work, but if you continue, it can become an automatic pilot. Positive thinking, training the mind. If you think, when I now think of negative words, within seconds it switches back to positivity. The change has come from within, not outside. We don't realise that we are the ones that create our own barriers and hurdles in life. Having anger and bitterness towards another does not help us move on. It slows us down. The day I forgave those that hurt me, it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Carrying the bitterness only disturbs your peace of mind and not others. My son is now 9. He sometimes lectures me, and I say, son, I already have a dad, I don't want another one. Can you please just be a 9-year-old boy to me? He just looks at me and shakes his head and mutters, mothers these days. We as mothers can change the future generation. It starts from us. Children are like uncut diamonds. We must shape them by feeding their hearts and minds with good things, teaching them love and compassion. Then they will shine beautifully. Just like Les Brown says, in all of us, you have greatness within you. Thank you.
Thank you. That is courage right there. Very, very brave. It would ruin it for me to comment on that because that was beautiful. Next, we have a talk about the support systems, a bit more uplifting, because this will also give us hope. And we have Pav Kaur from an organisation in Birmingham called Roshni, and she will be talking about what support is like, how accessible it is. So can we please welcome Pav.
Hello and good evening everybody. Thank you very much for having me here, and I'm delighted to be here. I would like to thank Bhulla for giving me an opportunity to come here and represent our Roshni and raise awareness on domestic violence. It's a question that many people ask, that why doesn't she just leave when they find out a woman is being abused or she's going through a domestic abuse. But if you know, or if you have been in an abusive relationship, you know that it's not easy to end an important relationship. Ending an important relationship is never easy. It's even harder when you've been isolated from your family, your friends, physically threatened, psychologically beaten down, or financially controlled. If you are trying to decide whether to stay or leave, you may be feeling confused, uncertain, frightened, or torn. One moment you may want to desperately get away from an abusive relationship, and the other, you may want to hang on to the relationship and give another chance, thinking that things might change and your relationship will work out. Maybe you even blame yourself for the abuse or feel weak and embarrassed because you've stuck around in spite of it. Don't be trapped by confusion, guilt, or self-harm. The only thing that matters is your safety. As I am representing Roshni Refuge here, I would like to give you a bit of background about Roshni. Roshni is a registered charity which has been operating for 30 years and is devoted to providing support for Asian women and children who have suffered from domestic abuse and forced marriages. As Roshni, we understand that needs and vulnerabilities of abused women and support them from their initial steps of leaving an abusive relationship through to starting a new life in a new home. As a refuge, Roshni provides safe emergency accommodation for women and children fleeing domestic violence, honour-based crimes, and forced marriages. We aim to promote the advancement of education and social welfare of Asian women, to enable them to utilise a maximum number of options and achieve to define and meet their needs themselves. The nature of our service and experience means that we are all culturally sensitive, understanding the pressure that our service users face and support their need. At Roshni, we support women and children with immigration matters, resettlement, welfare benefits, assessing health services, and finding nurseries and schools for kids, and gaining legal advice, including accompanying women to their appointments, such as going to a court or a solicitor's appointment. We also do safety planning with them, and we also provide education and employment. In the next slide, I would like to talk about how do women actually find will to seek help. Domestic abuse is very common and it can ruin lives. The police estimates that they get a call every 1 minute from someone who is actually fleeing domestic violence. It can take many years for a victim to seek help. However, many people such as doctors, social workers, school teachers, health visitors have the opportunity to identify potential warning signs earlier and provide direct support or signpost to appropriate services. Getting out of an abusive relationship or violent relationship, it's not easy. Maybe you're still hoping that things will change, or you're afraid of what your partner will think if he discovers that you're trying to leave. It takes a lot for women to report domestic violence. However, there is never a right time for you to report domestic abuse. Whatever your reasons are, you probably feel trapped or helpless, but help is available as if you are suffering from any kind of emotional or physical abuse, or if you have someone in your life who displays a number of signs of domestic abuse, then you should really consider getting help as soon as possible. Because if you do not report your concerns or tell someone about what is happening, then the abuse could escalate and the health and well-being of you and your family could be at risk. For example, Roshni, we dealt with one case where a woman got married abroad and on arrival to the UK, she started suffering abuse from the hands of her husband and her in-laws. Due to this individual not having enough knowledge about what help is available out there in the UK, she had to go through the trauma of abuse for over 4 years. This individual finally gained confidence to get out of this abusive relationship after discovering that her husband had planned for her death. Somehow, she had the courage to disclose the abuse to her friend, who then supported her to access agencies such as crisis centres and refugee helps and other legal agencies. So there are many resources out there available for abused women, including refuges, crisis centres, shelters, even job trainings, legal services and childcare. You deserve to live free of fear. Start by reaching out. It's time for you to control your life, not let others control it for you. Options for abused women not seeking help due to culture varies. Here I'm going to be talking about how women don't seek help when there is like family honour and family pressure. At Roshni we come across a large number of women who have suffered abuse for many years, however don't speak up because of culture barriers such as Egypt, that is your family honour, your pressure, emotional blackmailing, etc. Roshni support workers have dealt with many cases involving cultural barriers. However, we had one case in particular where the abused women managed to leave home after many years of physical and emotional abuse and accessed refuge help. On arrival to the refuge, Mrs. X was heavily pregnant and she gave birth to her daughter. However, during this time, Mrs. X was going through a lot of stress due to cultural barriers and her family pressuring her. She could not make her mind up whether to stay or leave because her family was keep telling her to go back, if not they would disown her. At Roshni, we advised her as to what was best for her and her child. We also referred her to counselling sessions. While Mrs. X was attending counselling session to overcome her emotions and stress, our children's workers were looking after her child. In the end, after receiving counselling sessions, Mrs. X realised that it's not always about your family honour, it's about her and her daughter's safety, which is more important than anything else. She managed to gain her confidence and overcome her emotions and lived happily and independently ever after with her daughter. So overall, the help available to overcome these fears is through counselling sessions. You can get group sessions or one-to-one session or session with your partner, and we can help you by referring you to Asian Family Counselling Services. We often think about children when a woman wants to report about domestic violence. She often thinks about, oh, what's going to happen with my child. Here we'll be talking about how we help children to overcome the trauma of domestic abuse. Children are supported to overcome the trauma of domestic abuse through play sessions, therapeutic work, homework hours, days out to cinemas and other outings. Most refuges have paid children workers whose priority is to supporting children and young people in the refuge. Services for children range from play sessions and therapeutic work, either provided by the children's workers or referring them to the specialist services. Nearly all refuges have playroom and other facilities for children. Some run play schemes in the holiday and have after-school activities. Children's behaviour is always affected when they are repeatedly witnessing abuse in the family environment. For example, Roshni has come across children who tend to show two sides to them, that is, one good side and a bad side. On arrival to the refuge, due to a new environment and due to abuse witnessed, we have children who tend to swear, hit their mothers, show tantrums, and sometimes even repeat the abuse witnessed by the perpetrator. Our children's workers start to put out play sessions into place registered at local children's centres, etc., to help improve behaviour and to help the children settle into their new life. Once mothers and children start to engage in the support provided by us, we see a change in their behaviour altogether, a change for best. We also support our clients with legal support. There is no requirement for a woman to take any legal actions, and this includes getting a divorce or obtaining any legal separation. However, if you do decide to get some legal support and want to apply for a divorce or any kind of emergency injunctions, which are non-molestation orders, usually forbids an abuser from using or threatening to physical violence, communication with you or intimidating you or harassing you, is typically granted for about 6 to 12 months, and it is an arrestable offence if breached. The other one is occupation orders, which regulates the family home, such as suspending rights to occupy visits, evicting an abuser from home, preventing an abuser from the from returning, and 100 metres protection around home is given. It can also be granted for 6 to 12 months, and power of arrest can be attached with occupation orders. Sometimes applying for injunctions, etc., gets challenging. However, most of the time you will get the order on first hearing in cases where the perpetrator does not like the fact where the victim has been able to access the support. They will make things hard for them. For example, at Roshni we dealt with someone called Mrs. A who have applied for non-molestation orders due to getting repetitive threats from her husband and her in-laws. This order was applied for an emergency basis, and it was challenged from the other party when they found out. The perpetrator was very controlling and didn't like the fact Mrs. A was able to stand on her feet and was able to speak out. Mrs. A eventually managed to get permanent non-molestation orders after giving the evidence in the court. Yet this was very challenging for Mrs. A. This experience gave Mrs. A confidence to stand and speak out loud. Sorry, I'm not running out of time, but it's just the final slide. Okay, this is finally what's our referral process when they come through our reviews. Most people are referred to us by the police, social workers, or health visitors when they report a crime. Anyone can contact us directly for confidential help, support, and information. After the referral process, we discuss the process with our manager and staff team, and then we let the victim know of the address. It's unlikely that we'll be able to pick the victim of violence up from their home address because of safety reasons. But if you have contact with other agencies like police, social services, they may agree to drop you off, or if you have no money to make your way to the refuge, then social services or whichever agency is involved with you may be able to provide you with travel money. Victims of violence stay in their violent homes for many reasons. Victims of domestic violence live in fear, isolated from their family, their friends, and are dependent on their abuser. In these circumstances, it can be hard to see a way out, and often the perfectly normal behaviour displayed by the abuser to the outside world can lead to conflicting and confusing emotions. Victims may start to blame themselves for the abuse, or may start to believe that the insult and criticisms are true. In the many cases, they ignore it, hoping the abuser will change and things will get better. Finally, to the end of the presentation, I would like to pass a message to all the people out there that if you are being abused, remember, you're not to blame for being mistreated. You are not the cause of your partner's abusive behaviour. You deserve to be treated with respect. Nobody has the right to abuse you this way. You may be made to feel responsible and guilty for the abuse, but the source of the problem is the abuser, not you. You and your children deserve to have a safe and happy life. You're not alone. There are people waiting out there to help. You need to control your own life rather than letting the abuser lead the life you're living. Don't change yourself for anyone. Let them accept the way you actually are. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pav. That does give a lot of people hope. It gives me hope. And can we get the guest speakers of 4 women who've shared a lot today to come up on stage to answer any questions that you guys in the audience have? I know we ran over time a little bit, but I'll still try and finish at 8:30. So, anybody have a question? Yeah?
If you know somebody who is going through some sort of abuse, but they can't see it for themselves, or they think that it's fine, what can you do as a friend or family member? What sort of what advice would you give? Or
You need to start giving them advice on saying if they can't recognise signs and symptoms of what they're going through, and they'll be thinking, oh, that's fine, it's normal in our culture, then you maybe need to take them to maybe a women's aid or take them some leaflets and tell them that this is not acceptable in our culture these days. They do have the right to live their own lives, so maybe you need to make them aware of what they're going through. They shouldn't be really going through what they're actually going through, so maybe talk to them and show them some videos, or maybe tell them about case studies. We've heard so many case studies today, and you can talk about their experience and see what they actually say, and maybe you should be able to then learn, okay, maybe this is not acceptable. I hope this gives you an answer.
Well, we face the issue that it's normalised to a lot of people, and then you face the issue that how do you then go and tell them this is not right? It can scare them off. How do you deal with such a sensitive thing? Sadish, because also you work in a support organisation.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult situation. When you've got a friend or a relative or somebody who's experiencing it and they can't see it for themselves, we know that research tells us that women are often abused, physically abused, at least 35 times before they actually seek help. And so in that case, it might be that your friend's not ready yet or your relative's not ready yet. And as scary as it sounds, we can't force anything on them. This is about giving them the choice. It's about being there for them, being that listening ear, being non-judgmental towards them, and just, I guess, keeping in touch with them and ensuring that they're okay. And when things get too bad or when they realise what's going on, they will call for help. And I guess you want to be that person that's there that can advise them and say, look, I know about an agency, talk to them. And just by phoning us, it doesn't mean that you have to leave home or you've made a commitment to something. It's fine to call us, talk to us. We can send somebody out to come and meet you. It doesn't have to be in the home. It can be in a coffee shop, in a community centre. We host surgeries all across Birmingham, and they're set days. So you can drop into, whether it's in a children's centre or whether it's in a community centre, you can drop in and just have a chat with somebody. Don't have to give your name, don't have to give any details, and get some advice from a professional in that way. But at the end of the day, you can't do anything until they're ready to make the move.
I think, just picking up on that and speaking as a mental health specialist, I think we also have to be sensitive to how people internalise and deal with such shocking behaviours, and a lot of people tend to go through this process of denial to begin with, and not recognising what's actually happening, and not seeking help means understanding that it's happening firstly and then going to deal with it. So in a lot of cases people don't firstly recognise what's happening, but secondly a lot of them are actually in denial with the situation and in shock. So I think it's just about being sensitive to that as well.
It's about giving them hinting as well. If they're not ready to accept it, maybe you need to tell them, oh, I know this person who's been going through this for that long, and then they seek help from this agency. Maybe then it will click in and they will think, okay, maybe I need to talk to them. Sometimes we get phone calls and then they ask us, oh, what kind of support can we give them? And then slowly, when we do have a conversation with them, they do tend to disclose, okay, this is what's happening with me, what shall I do? Even for phone advice, it doesn't have to be that, you have to go through a referral process or something like that. It's just basically giving them hints, this is not right, that what you are going through.
Okay,
Can I just
thank
add
you.
on to that?
Yes, please, Winda.
But there is another issue as well. When people do go through what they're going through, if they've seen it as they grow up, they think it's normal. So how would they understand? They might think it's normal to be that, and they may be thinking, just like I did, was hope.
I'm actually so pleased you said that, because in thinking about your really brave talk as well, you have to go back to basics, and you have to go back to the heart, the mind and the person. And if someone is in that situation where they're dealing with a close family member or a close friend that they care about, and they can see what's happening but they can't actually do anything about it because that person doesn't recognise it, bring them back to basics, ask the question, are you happy? Encourage them to recognise that something's not quite right here themselves, and then take it from there.
Encourage them, saying if your family or if someone has been through this, you don't have to go through it yourself. you know, there are people who want to help you. You don't have to go through this only because you've been in that family and your mom and dad or someone you know has been through this experience, that you need to tell them that this is not the experience that they need to go through.
So, you said, how do you tell someone who's grown up with it, who's normalised them? Do you think, how can the community get involved in nurturing young people down a good path?
I think it kind of starts from the mother. The mother gives life, creates life, and to continue to think it's normal. But when your child grows up and becomes an adult and repeats the same thing, it's a vicious cycle. And it starts from us as mothers to bring them up in a happy environment, to teach them love and compassion. And only then we can see change. And it's a difficult journey, and it has to start from somewhere.
Going back to your question, I think, you know, when it comes to community, people like you yourself holding this event today to raise awareness, I think we need to, you know, hold more events like these to, you know, raise actual awareness, especially in our South Asian community, because people think it's normal because in my family this happened and that should continue. I think we need to hold more events like this so people can get out there and reach this help, and, you know, they can realize that, no, if our family went through it, then this is not, only we need to actually educate our community, because there is a lack of education on this topic, I would say.
You're completely right, and I think it's also important that where there's influence, like places of worship, those are the sorts of places that people that we need to be talking to about raising awareness. And I mean, we've done some work, you know, sort of held evening workshops in some of the gurdwara, and spoke to women about this. And it is about empowering women to challenge other women as well about their behaviour. And, you know, lots of people were saying, oh, we know that it goes on in our family, our relatives, you know, one of our relatives is doing this to their daughter-in-law, the daughter-in-law is doing this, and the son's doing this. And again, it's the same thing. It's about empowering. It's about giving people the knowledge and information, and then they can go back and share that and challenge people. You know, it's difficult for us as agencies to go around challenging people, because we can challenge other agencies and we can challenge, you know, people who work in these environments, but we can't go out and challenge individual people. It makes it very difficult. But what can happen is that the community needs to step up and start challenging each other about this issue, and asking, you know, when something's going on, somebody needs to step up and say that's actually wrong.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm conscious of time here, and we've got a few more questions. Sarah at the back.
Right, I've got a question, right, and that is, how can I put it? You go on about domestic violence, right? Well, what if there's drugs, substances within the household? How do you go on about sorting that out within your programme at this moment in time?
So, to Sahdaish and Pall, in your organisations, have you come across drugs in any cases? Is that what you would like to know?
Yeah. Because a lot of stuff comes around, sort of drugs, alcohol, and misuse of that causes a lot of this violence, as well as the stem of cultural. Do you understand me? This is from my point of view.
When under the influence, it's common that gets used as an excuse. What do you have to say about that? Drugs?
How do you fight that?
Okay, I think it's very important to make it clear, because when the work that we do is about working with the victim, what we do is when we're talking to the victim, if there's issues like that, then what we do is we make a referral to the agency. So whether it's AdAction, whether it's mental health services, whether it's social services, to get them involved. Because as an agency, we can't work both with the victim and the perpetrator as well. And that's why when I said in one of my slides with the work that we do as a group, there is Fry Housing Trust, which is part of our organisation, works with offenders, and so they've got real expertise, years of experience of working with offenders. and working with people who've got drug addictions or alcohol issues. And so the referrals would go through to an agency like that.
Well, I work for an organisation called Kick It, right? And it's stationed in Birmingham,
Yeah.
right? We have a women's liberty group that sort of, even though it's drugs, alcohol and genitalia and all this is entailed into that, right? Have you ever thought of linking in with a project like ours?
I've heard of your organisation, and definitely after this we can have a chat about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions? Sir, you had your hand up.
I did, but I think the panel's kind of answered it.
Sir, by the aisle, right there.
Could I ask what, speaking as a GP and a city councillor, what actions would you like to see from the services such as general practice, health visiting, social services, or indeed the city council itself, which will help you in promoting what you're trying to do?
Can I weigh in on that one? I believe that the cultural barriers that haven't been mentioned today, I believe that that's got potential to be a criteria in education. And me and Karen, we've been invited, for example, we've been invited to speak to counsellors, not governing bodies, but therapists in Manchester, to teach them about our culture so they know what to expect when somebody of a South Asian persuasion comes to them. And I think the knowledge of the cultural barriers that we face, it will ease on you. And so we no longer have to say to people who aren't South Asian, you won't understand, it's something we do. So hopefully we no longer have to say that.
Yeah. Just to pick up on that, we can have a chat in depth afterwards if you like. But a lot of the training and education I do is around that area for services across health and social care and governing bodies and councils. And it's more about the personalisation of services and treating those individuals as individuals with an awareness of those cultural norms. But we can talk more about that afterwards.
Yeah. A couple more questions at the back.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, in Birmingham City Council, I'm one of the councillors in Birmingham City Council, we've passed a scrutiny report which has given a commitment to working with community and faith organisations in dealing with relationship violence, and that was only just yesterday. And I think one of the issues are about raising awareness, because, for example, when you spoke about your situation, it seemed as though you were struggling to find out where to go and get the help. And I think because victims are isolated, there needs to be more awareness in the community in general, not closed forums like this, because I imagine quite a lot of people here are from different agencies, but in the community in general, in terms of educating them that if they are going through something like this, then where do they go to for help? Because I think quite a lot of the fear is the fear of the unknown. So victims don't know, well, if I go to an agency, will my children get taken off me? What will the community say? So I think all those things need to be addressed as part of the equation. So what are you doing as organisations to address those issues?
Okay, so as an organisation, like I said, that we already do some work within religious places of worship. It could do with going wider. Sometimes it's very difficult to speak to leaders in faith-based organisations because they don't want to talk about this topic, and there are some that are very good and very open to this. But also, we use media as well, just like you, Bhulla. You've made a film. We've been involved in films. We've been involved in dramas. So we take it out. We take the stage out to the community. Radio interviews, newspapers, all of those sorts of things. And even now, I think with Sky and all of the sort of this blow up of new Asian television, and there's community-based television channels now. Those are the ones that are on in people's homes in the background constantly. And so if we can get them to be open to us to coming out and talking about these issues, then you're likely to reach a wider community as well.
We've got time for one more question because we're running over a few minutes. No? Yeah. One more.
It's quite a personal one. I just wanted to know, sharing your story has helped you. Do you feel better for it?
Good question. I mean, when I was looking, when Bhulla actually asked me to sit on the panel, that was one thing, but then he said, Rinda, would you like to share your story? I think at that time I said no, but for me to move forward and to accept what's happened, and it's actually helped me. And I think from today onwards, I can move on.
I want to say thank you.
No, thank you.
We'll just finish there on that positive note. And I just want to say the topic of domestic abuse in South Asian communities has had enough sufferers, and it's had its time in the dark where it's never to be spoken about. And enough people have suffered from the consequences of cultural barriers. I believe that the more we continue to make noise, like events like this, involving the media, creativity, openness and honesty, I believe that the more we make aware of support systems, the less control an abuser has. I think by doing this and listening to this, going to events like this, share what you've learnt today, take a lot away from what you've learnt today, I hope you do, and pass it on, be positive, have hope. I'd just like to say there's feedback sheets. I've done this as an individual, and I very much would appreciate your feedback and constructive criticism, because this is not the end for me, this is just the start. Well, I know that. Thank you. Can I say thank you to the speakers, to Sahdaish, Pall and Karan. Thank you to the people around me, the 12 people around me. They've helped a lot. They've made this work. I couldn't have done it without them. And thank you for attending.